Hey HTDA, and welcome back to my step-by-step spoiler-free guide to Techtonica. Last time around I got slightly distracted by building a giant bus and mall, but this time around it's time to make some major progress again. And just to reiterate, you don't need that giant mall and bus, you can just work with the setup that we had before as well. It's actually more time efficient if that is something you care about. Regardless of how you do it, you are going to need the excavator bits Mark V, because that's the only thing that will allow you to dig up to level 13. I will also assume that whatever way you took, you do have the relay circuits and electric motors in production now. You're going to need these for all the tier 2 machines, you're going to need the electric motors to make Mark III belts, and you're going to need both of these to make a green science. With these materials at your disposal, it should be very easy to get yourself some conveyor belts going. You should already have the advanced circuits, and then upgrade the Thermal Victor to tier 6. And while you're at it, you might as well upgrade it to tier 7 right away, because you should already have these materials as well. There isn't really anything vital in the upper parts of the Victor research tree, but the upgrade to the threshing speed is quite nice, as well as pretty much everything else. It's mostly just quality of life stuff. You can also upgrade X-ray to tier 5, which does actually give you quite a few nice upgrades. For example, you can now make Atlantum slabs, just like we were already making the iron and copper slabs, and you can then thresh them into ingots. That's a lot easier to produce your ingots that way compared to first making the Atlantum mixture. You now also get access to the stack filter inserter, which, as the name suggests, it combines the stacking inserter, which places a lot of items on the belt, with the filter that allows you to filter the items that you want to actually place. This in particular is very useful for your elevator, because you only need a couple of slots to get a massive amount of items on a particular belt. And in case you were wondering, the stack filter inserter places 450 items per minute on a belt, so it's actually equivalent to 15 of the filter inserters. However, before you get into all of that, I really recommend you continue on to the next few levels. So what we're actually going to be doing is continue on to level 12. So last warning, if you haven't seen that yet, you haven't explored that yet, make sure you do that first and then come back to this video. Okay, so let's talk about level 12 and onwards. First of all, there's a disconnect between your first 11 floors and this one and the ones beyond. So basically, no power will be able to be transferred from levels 1 to 11 to levels 12 and above. However, all the power between levels 12 and onwards is actually then connected to each other once again. So you basically have two separate power zones. Second of all of these floors are covered in sand, and we're going to need to pump away the sand to get access to more resources, but also to some of the facilities that will have new things we can scan. In order to get rid of that sand, you're going to need some sand pumps, and for this first level you only need a couple of these pumps, and that will do the trick. You are going to need to dump a massive amount of fuel in these pumps, however, so if you haven't done so, you are definitely going to need either a biodiesel facility or just a simple biobrick facility will do the trick for now. So, just as a reminder, if you have a shiverthorn facility that is making shiverthorn extract, which is going to be very useful very soon as well, then you also are producing some plant matter. If you combine that plant matter with some assemblers and with some limestone, you can churn out a pretty impressive amount of biobricks just by combining those two resources and putting them back on the belt. The pumps are really easy to get going, honestly. All you need is a couple of Mark III belts. Oh, ideally Mark III belts, Mark II belts even work as well. Some incoming fuel. Again, with the stack filter inserters, you can easily get enough fuel on a belt to do that, just with a single line and a single stacker inserter on both sides. And, well, as you can see, now it's running. And you can see how this pump works. It's going to have a certain pump speed. The sand in the room is actually going to refill. However, as long as you are pumping out it faster than it's going to be refilling, the sand level will slowly start dropping down. In order to make all of this work, of course, you do need some power, which is where the crank generators Mark II come in, that will be running for only an hour, but of course you can fix that with a battery pack. And by battery pack, I just mean a huge amount of accumulators. These are definitely not needed. It's just if you want to be lazy and not return every hour to your facility, turn it back on, even though that's like 5 seconds of work, this will help you let it run a little longer. In order to upgrade Sierra to level 2, we're going to need some glass and we're going to need some carbon frames. You can start bringing the sand back to your home base, wherever that is, and by means of using the stack filter inserters, you should be able to easily make room in some of the ports on your main base. As you can see, this is everything I'm bringing to my completely automated facility over here, which is huge, and I still have like over 50% of my ports left. Just a single smelter will do a pretty good job in turning sesamite sand into normal sand, and then a second smelter will turn that sand into glass. That takes care of the first item, but the second item we need are the carbon frames. First of all, you need to unlock these, and as you can see from the recipe, we're going to need steel frames, copper frames, and carbon powder bricks. Now the frames we already have covered, so you should have those in production already. However, the carbon powder bricks are something you have probably not produced just yet. You make carbon powder bricks in an assembler, and you do so by putting in 500 carbon powder to make a couple of bricks. Now that's a massive amount. The nice thing is you can make carbon powder out of pretty much everything. Remember how we just unlocked the top level of X-ray? Well, that includes the blast incineration, which allows you to put pretty much any building or any other structural asset into a blast smelter and blast it straight into oblivion and make carbon powder out of that. You also have some more basic recipes. Let me see where that is. Somewhere further down the tree. You already unlocked it a long time ago, where you can just smelt pretty much anything that is organic into carbon powder as well. However, a much easier way to get those bricks is just by blast mining them from the carbon veins that are right there at level 12. You will need to make sure the sand drops a little bit. You can see where my battery pack is up there. This is the elevator level. It's a little bit down from there, but there's stairs already leading there from your elevator right down. And there are actually quite a few of these nodes all around the place. So just place down a couple of these blast drills and get mining. Get an assembler going with some of those frames and those bricks, and you have all the carbon frames you're going to need. As a side note, you might run into a situation where your pumps are actually hitting the ground because they pumped out all the sand they could. If that's the case, you might need to relocate your pumps a little bit to accommodate and make sure they're actually digging down into the sand once again. However, in the long run, you really do not want to rely on biobricks in order to fuel your pumps. So you're going to want to make some biobrick diesel. The way to do this is actually a little bit complicated when you first look at it, so let me walk you through it. One of the key ingredients that you're going to need to produce pretty much anything from this point forward is sesamite gel. And as you can see, you can make that from shiverthorn extract gel as well as sand. We're gonna have plenty of sand, that's not a problem, but we do need a lot of shiverthorn extract gel. You make that very easily actually from shiverthorn extract, but you need a lot of it. We'll have to increase that production of the shiverthorn in a moment, but first of all, just to get it going. So just a single assembler making the shiverthorn gel is plenty for now. And as you can see, it will soak up 600 extract per minute, which is nowhere near what we're currently producing. So just get it going and then have a secondary line of machines that takes in some of that gel and some sand as well and start making some sesamite gel just to keep it going. You're going to need that gel for a couple of different things, but for now we can start turning it into powder by throwing it into a smelter. You can use the fancier smelters that you've unlocked just now and that just work on electricity, but they're kind of complicated to make and quite expensive to make, honestly. So I prefer just throwing in some biobricks to keep these Mark 1 or Mark 2 smelters running. Now you're going to need that dust again for several things as well, so make sure you start storing it up. For one, we need that sesamite powder in order to make sesamite coolant, and in order to make that, we're going to need a whole lot of shiverthorn coolant, which you can actually mass produce using an alternate recipe that requires iron mechanisms that we've been making for a very long time but haven't really been using them yet, some shiverthorn extract, and again, some more powder. Keep in mind that these mass-produced recipes do exactly that, they mass-produce, so you can produce up to 1,000 shiverthorn extract per minute, which is actually more than you can fit on a Mark III belt. So I have 2 output belts over here, one going through here in the back and then one here in the front, and I actually have 2 rows of the coolant as well that we make from the sesamite sand after that. So as you can see, this is not exactly mass producing, so you're going to need a whole lot more of these assemblers to actually turn this stuff into coolant that you need. Similarly, you only really need 1 assembler making biobricks with the advanced recipe, just using the carbon bricks along with some of the gel, and you will get a massive amount of biobricks. Now you can turn those biobricks along with the coolant that we just made into biofuel. And again, you're going to need quite a few assemblers of those because, well, there's no such thing as having too much fuel, considering we're going to need to do a whole lot of pumping. The good news is that with a setup like this, you are going to actually produce quite a bit of fuel that will last you for pretty much the rest of the game, most likely, depending a little bit on how you balance things, but this should take you very, very far. Now, for all of this, you're going to need a fair amount of shiverthorn, so, well, just double up on the production that you already had, and you might want to consider putting an assembler between your threshers and your production, because then you can make these shiverthorn buds that are neutralized by adding in some kindlefine. You should have plenty of that by now, and that will allow you to get way more shiverthorn from the threshing process, and you also do not get the plant matter as a side product, so you don't need to deal with that either. And just one of those setups that I just showed you will produce a massive amount of that shiverthorn, so again, you should have enough for the rest of the game by doing that. In order to efficiently drain your levels, I recommend that you completely switch your pumps now to the biofuel diesel, and you are also going to be looking for some of these pits in the floor that are way down usually, and those will actually allow you to pump out the entire level. So what you're looking for is a placement of a pump that shows the sand remaining for the pump to be equivalent to the sand remaining for the level. That means that you found the deepest point on your map. Placing a couple of pumps there will make sure that they keep pumping forever and that they will go all the way down. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Now, for the first level, of course, you also need to look a little bit at the dig speed versus the refill rate. As you can see, the refill rate is 1000. The dig speed, because I have 2 pumps, is 4000. So I'm still draining the level, and I will continue to do so. This will never refill as long as at least one of these pumps keeps working. Another thing to keep in mind is that power is actually shared between levels 12 and above. So not between level 11 and 12. So anything that is below 11 will be connected, and anything that is above 12 will be connected, just not in between. So setting up one power facility will actually power everything from level 12 onwards. And if you just build yourself a decently sized power pack, then the overproduction from the power network, which you should have plenty of, is going to be able to withdraw from the accumulators for probably a couple of hours without too much work. So you only need to revisit that every few hours. Just make sure that you don't build too many production things inside levels 12 and onwards, because honestly, that's just going to make your life harder than it needs to be. All of this is going to allow you to easily pump out levels 12 and 13. You're going to be producing quite a bit of sand in the process though, so make sure that you have somewhere for all that sand to go, otherwise your pumps will stop working. But the easiest way to do that is just put a smelter and transform some of that sesamite sand into normal sand, and then the sand into glass. That's a pretty sand consuming endeavor, but you're also going to need that sand to make gel and stuff like that, so feel free to also upgrade that production. Which means that you now have plenty of gel in production. You can smelt all the gel into powder. We have a massive amount of fuel in production, and all of this should probably take you a couple of hours, so it's a good point to end this episode. In the next episode, we're going to go progress quite a bit through the technology tree, maybe clear out a couple of levels. Either way, if you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.